What does the earliest Jewish and Christian art look like?
Most of the earliest Jewish and Christian art dates from the Hellenistic period, and takes its cues from Near Eastern and Classical, Greek and Roman, art. Early Jewish artists were forbidden from making any form that could be worshipped as an idol, and therefore avoided representational art. Early Christian art drew its symbols from Jewish tradition as well as classical tradition. A common subject in early Christian art, for example, is the Good Shepherd. In the classical tradition, the Good Shepherd represents the mythological figure Orpheus, who is shown holding a sheep around his shoulders. Early Christian artists used this as a model for early images of Christ in both sculptural and painted form. Referring to Psalm 23, which states, "The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I lack," Psalm 23:1. This is an example of syncretism, an art historical term which refers to the merging of meaning and imagery between different cultures and religions.
What is the difference between Hiberno-Saxon art and Anglo-Saxon art?
The term Hiberno-Saxon art refers to non-Christian, pagan, art produced after the fall of the Roman Empire by the Irish, known as Hibernians, and the Anglo-Saxon peoples of southern England. While Anglo-Saxon art also refers to early medieval art of the British Isles, it is more closely associated with Christian themes and subject matter. Both of these terms are used by art historians when referring to art produced from around 600 to 1066. The date of the Norman conquest of Britain.
What is the Bayeux Tapestry?
Who knew there was such as thing as monumental embroidery? There is nothing quite like the 11th century Bayeux Tapestry. At nearly 2 feet high and over 230 feet long. This work is not actually a tapestry, it is not woven, but embroidered linen. The colorful piece combines text and narrative imagery to tell the story of the Norman conquest of England. In 1066, there are over 600 human figures, 700 animals, and 2,000 letters in all. An astonishing work of fiber art, the Bayeux Tapestry is also an important historical artifact that documents one of the most significant military campaigns in European history.
What was so revolutionary about Crucio's boy?
Crucio's boy, about 470 B.C.E., is damaged. His arms appear lopped off at the elbow and his legs, with no feet, end in stumps. His hair is like a stylized bowl with a rim of curls. And yet, this dusty relic represents one of the most Important and exciting innovations in the history of art. Krzyżowy is not a mere archaic sculpture. He does not stare straight ahead with a vacant look in his eyes. Krzyżowy shifts his body weight to one side. With hips tilted. One leg is slightly bent. This position is called the contrapposto style. Contrapposto literally means counterpose. With this small shift, Krzyżowy appears much more alive than his previous counterparts. There is a small curve in his spine, and his head is turned slightly to one side. This is a freestanding sculpture in the round. And the gently curving movements of Krzyżowy invite the viewer to make a 360-degree tour around him. Gone is the playful archaic smile. Instead, Krzyżowy is solemn and serious. A youthful athlete, Krzyżowy represents Greek ideals of youth, manhood, and physical and mental strength.
What is the difference between suprematism and constructivism?
Both suprematism and constructivism were art movements that developed in Russia in the early 20th century and promoted geometric abstraction, however. Unlike suprematism, constructivism promoted the idea that art had an important social function. The difference between the two is therefore primarily ideological, rather than aesthetic.
What is a basilica plan church/synagogue?
While early Jewish and Christian synagogues and churches started out in private homes, over time a need for larger spaces for worship resulted in buildings constructed for specific use. The Roman basilica structure was particularly inspirational to early Jews and Christians, as they were designed to accommodate large public gatherings, albeit for civic functions. The basilica plan churches featured a central nave flanked by two narrower aisles on each side, separate by rows of columns. At one end of the nave was a semicircular apse, usually facing the direction of Jerusalem. Basilica plan synagogues usually had space for the Torah in the apse. During the 3rd century CE, Emperor Constantine began a large-scale building program in Rome during which the original St. Peter's Basilica was constructed over the believed site of St. Peter's burial. It is now referred to as Old St. Peter's Basilica because it was destroyed to make way for new St. Peter's Basilica, a building that stands to this day. Old St. Peter's Basilica was so popular during its time that it served to popularize the basilica plan style of church building for centuries.
What happened to the colossal Buddha at Bamiyan?
While the colossal Buddha at Bamiyan once rose nearly 200 feet in a specially carved niche in the side of a mountain in the Hindu Kush region of Afghanistan, it, along with another massive Those slightly smaller, sculpture, were destroyed by the Taliban in 2001. Originally constructed between the 2nd and 5th centuries, the style of the monumental work was influenced by the many cultures of the region, including China and India, and was once brightly painted with layers of paint and lime plaster, which resulted in a semi-transparent look influenced by the Gupta style. The colossal Buddha was not the only Buddhist sculpture destroyed by the Taliban. Almost all Buddhist art in the nearby region was targeted, a controversial example of iconoclastic action.
What is the picture plane?
For more information on perspective, Brunelleschi, and the picture plane, please see the early modern world, c. 400-1300.
Why was Joseph Albers interested in the square?
Joseph Albers, 1888 to 1976, was a progressive German artist who taught at the Bauhaus, and went on to become one of the most influential art teachers in the United States. He held posts at the influential Black Mountain College in North Carolina, and at Yale University, where he taught color theory and abstraction, and experimented with visual perception and illusion. Albers is known for his series of prints and paintings titled Homage to the Square, in which he placed a square within a square using various colors, creating a dynamic and often ambiguous sense of depth, geometry, and color contrast for such apparently simple paintings. Albers was able to use the square to experiment with color theory and depth perception in a profound way.
What is Paleolithic art?
In Greek, palea means old and lithos means stone. Paleolithic art is therefore Artei created during the Old Stone Age, which lasted from about 35,000 to 8,000 BCE. During the last ice age, the Paleolithic period was characterized by the human use of stone tools. People of this period were migratory hunter-gatherers who sought shelter near rocks and caves. Art of this time is the oldest ever discovered, and fascinating examples include cave paintings, rock paintings, and stone sculpture.
What is stained glass?
Stained glass is translucent colored glass set in a lead framework, and usually used in windows. Stained glass was used in early Christian and Byzantine churches as well, but was particularly favored by Gothic architects, for whom it began an important form of art. The process of making stained glass hasn't changed much in nearly 1,000 years. The colors in the glass come from adding metal oxides to molten glass, a labor-intensive process. Detailed images are made by using black enamel paint and fusing it to the glass through firing. The glass artist then organizes the colored glass fragments on a flat surface, like an enormous puzzle, until reaching the desired image, and then joins the glass to lead strips and iron bands, which support the heavy glass.
What is Donatello's David?
Donatello, Donato di Niccolo de Beto di Bardi, c. 1386 to 1466, was considered a genius of the early Renaissance. He had a long career as a sculptor and is responsible for the famous bronze David, the first life-size male nude sculpture made since antiquity. Donatello's David is surrounded in mystery. Art historians do not know who the patron was, for example, though it was placed in a courtyard at the Medici Palace, home of the ruling family in Florence at the time. It is thought that the noble David symbolizes the recent Florentine military victory over neighboring city-state Milan, in 1428. In this piece, Donatello represents this Old Testament hero as a young, nude man in early adolescence. His hips are tilted in a confident contrapposto pose and he stands with knees slightly bent, over the dismembered head of his foe, Goliath. A large feather from Goliath's helmet can be seen reaching high up the inside of David's leg. Donatello's David is at once a reflection of the classical tradition of sculpture making and an erotic depiction of youthful heroism. It is quite different from another famous David done by Michelangelo.
Why is this not a pipe?
René Magritte's The Treachery, or Perfidy, of Images, 1928 to 1929. Is a highly realistic oil painting of a tobacco pipe with the word Ceci n'est pas un pipe, this is not a pipe. Painted below.
What is a caryatid?
A caryatid is a sculptural female figure utilized as columnar support in classical architecture. The Roman architect and writer, Vitruvius, noted that caryatids were named for Spartan women from a town called Caryae who betrayed their people during the Persian Wars, and were punished by being forced to bear the weight of heavy architectural entablatures. The Erechtheion, 421 to 405 BCE, is a building on the Acropolis in Athens famous for what is known as the Porch of the Maidens. This porch features 6 caryatids, which face south in the direction of the Parthenon. Like Critio's boy, each caryatid is in the contrapposto pose, with one leg bearing the weight of the Erechtheion's Ionic entablature, and the other leg free and slightly bent. The folds in their robes mirror the vertical design of fluting found on columns and provide a sense of stability in the otherwise fluid and graceful poses of the caryatids.
Who was Henry Ossawa Tanner?
Henry Ossawa Tanner, 1859 to 1937, was the first internationally renowned African American artist and was the most successful African American artist of the 19th century. He studied under Thomas Eakins at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Art and later moved to Paris, where he spent the majority of his career. Tanner is often considered a realist painter. For example, while the Annunciation, 1898, is a common biblical subject, Tanner includes realistic details he drew from his travels in the Middle East, such as clothing styles and interior decoration that visually grounds the Virgin Mary's divine encounter with the angel Gabriel. Tanner's most famous painting, The Banjo Lesson, 1893, is a quiet depiction of an elderly black man teaching a young boy to play the banjo. The painting emphasized the dignity of the scene during a time when similar scenes would have been rendered as comical or stereotypical. Like the paintings of French realists such as Millet and Courbet, Tanner's work exhibits social awareness and a sense of monumentality. Tanner's later work was predominantly religious, as the artist preferred to paint biblical subjects that reflected the struggles of 19th century African Americans.
What is the difference between Theravada Buddhism and Mahayana Buddhism?
Theravada Buddhism is the earliest form of the religion and is called the Path of the Elders. It is most popular in India, Sri Lanka, and parts of mainland Southeast Asia. Mahayana Buddhism is the second important school of Buddhism and is known as the Great Path. Mahayana Buddhist worship bodhisattvas, compassionate Buddhas to be who understand the path to enlightenment and devote themselves to teaching others who to achieve nirvana. Mahayana Buddhism is popular in northern India, China, Japan, Korea, and Nepal.
Who are the young British artists?
The Young British Artists, YBAs, are a loosely affiliated group of contemporary artists working in London, many of whom trained at London's Goldsmiths College in the late 1980s. Many of the young British artists gained the support of wealthy patrons, such as advertising magnate and art collector Charles Saatchi. The young British artists included Damien Hirst, 1965, who curated a show of YBA work at a warehouse in 1988, putting the group on the map. Other members, such as Gary Hume and Fiona Ray, exhibited in this early show, while others Rachel Whiteread, 1963, and Tracy Emin, c. 1963, did not, but are also considered YBAs. The work of these artists is very diverse. Gary Hume and Fiona Ray are primarily painters, while Whiteread and Emin are known for their conceptual sculpture and installations.
What happened? Did the medieval artists forget how to draw? Is this a result of the so-called Dark Ages?
Looking at medieval art from a contemporary perspective occasionally raises questions about quality, but it is important to remember that medieval artists, including painters, were highly skilled craftsmen who worked meticulously on their designs. Medieval artists made specific choices about their work and were motivated not by realism, but by religion. In the 6th century, a debate arose amongst Christian church leaders as to whether or not figurative imagery was appropriate for religious art. Then, Pope Gregory the Great declared, "Painting can do for the illiterate what writing does for those who can read," as quoted in Gombrich 135. The goal of medieval art, according to Pope Gregory, was to simply and clearly depict religious themes. The quality of the artwork was not supposed to overshadow its religious content for fear of idol worship.
What was Dura Europo?
Dura Europo was an ancient trading town established in the 3rd century B.C.E. and abandoned by 256 CE in modern-day Syria, after being long forgotten. The settlement was rediscovered by British soldiers in the early 20th century. The site features Greco-Roman temples dedicated to Greek gods such as Zeus and Artemis, as well as temples decorated with images of ancient Near Eastern deities such as the Persian god Mithras, and a variation on the Sumerian moon goddess, Nana. Also found here was one of the earliest known Jewish synagogues and a Christian house church. Both early Christians and early Jews built their churches and synagogues in private houses. The Dura Europo synagogue was large and richly decorated with interior wall paintings, emphasizing green and yellow color schemes, and featured a niche for Torah scrolls. The house church was built in 246 CE and contained one of the earliest known baptismal fonts. The walls were decorated with images from both the Old and New Testament, including an image of Christ walking on water. The Dura Europo site preserves evidence of a rich melting pot of ancient cultures and gives scholars insights into the visual culture of early Jews and Christians of the ancient world.
How does the religion of Islam influence art?
Like early Byzantine art, Islamic art is influenced by iconoclastic views. This means that it is forbidden to depict idols, or images of God in human form. In Islam it is also haram, forbidden, to depict the Prophet Muhammad in art. And this is often extended to include the image of any human figure and animals. Much Islamic art, therefore, is characterized by mathematically complex abstraction featuring organic, geometric, and vegetal decorative patterns known as arabesques. There are some exceptions to this, the Islamic art of Mughal India, as well as Persian art, are both known for lively narrative paintings featuring characters from stories and legends. Still, one will not find any representation of God or Muhammad in Islamic art.
What is mannerism?
While many of the most successful artists of the early 16th century followed the classical aesthetic so popular during the Renaissance, not everyone did. Overall, Renaissance artists valued naturalistic representations of the ideal human, both physically and mentally, and art with balanced, symmetrical, and proportionate forms. It can come as a shock, therefore, to see work such as Bronzino's Algieri with Venus and Cupid, an erotic and slightly disturbing painting of Venus kissing her son, Cupid. The painting is filled with twisted, elongated figures. They appear weightless, limbs seem attached at odd angles, and the colors are off. Behind Cupid's contorted body, a woman screams, grabbing her hair. To the right, a cherub hurls flowers like a weapon. At his feet, theatrical masks depict ugly faces. Although allegory with Venus and Cupid may be a sensational example, it is certainly not the only early 16th century painting to exhibit such anomalies of naturalism. Other artists, including Pio Antormo, Parmigianino, and Benvenuto Cellini, favored what is known as the Mannerist style in Italy. The definition of mannerism is controversial, but it is generally thought of as an intellectual and rebellious alternative to the refined styles of High Renaissance. It is characterized by elongated figures in unstable poses, the use of pastel colors, and sometimes, sexual overtones. Mannerist art was popular amongst courtly, rather than religious, patrons. While the style developed in Italy, it was also popular in Northern Europe.
What was innovative about Durham Cathedral?
Norman architecture, also known as the English Romanesque, is punctuated by the dramatic heights of Durham Cathedral. Norman architecture is named for the Norsemen, Vikings, who settled in France, Normandy, converted to Christianity, and attacked the British Isles in 1066, with William the Conqueror as their leader. Durham Cathedral is evidence of William the Conqueror's Christian legacy as one of the tallest cathedrals in England. But it is not simply size that makes Durham Cathedral innovative. It is the manner in which Durham's builders were able to achieve such height, ribbed vaults,
Who was Henri Cartier-Bresson?
While the FSA photographers focused their attention on rural America, French photographer Henri Cartier-Bresson 1908 to 2004, documented the Spanish Civil War, 1936 to 1939, and much of 20th century Europe. Cartier-Bresson is considered one of the foremost early photojournalists, which means he communicated the news through pictures, but he was also deeply inspired by surrealism, and took seemingly spontaneous snapshots while walking through the streets of Paris. Henri Cartier-Bresson is known for his uncanny ability to remain neutral as a photographer, to maintain a fly-on-the-wall perspective. He also subtly incorporates psychological interest into his work, making his seemingly simple photographs emotionally and intellectually complex.
What is the Book of Doe?
The Book of Doe is a 7th century Christian gospel book, most likely made at a monastery on the island of Iona in Scotland. The beautifully decorated Book of Doe includes the text of the 4 Gospels of the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Each section begins with a carpet page, or a full-page illustration, representing each saint's symbol. For example, the carpet page of the Gospel of Saint Matthew is decorated with the symbol of the man. In this illumination, the figure is covered in a colorful, yet flat, checkered cloak that completely obscures any sense of a three-dimensional body underneath. Rather sullen, the figure has no visible arms, and seems to float in the center of page, surrounded by an interlaced, ribbon-like design which forms a frame around the page. Not particularly lifelike, the representation of the St. Matthew's symbol in the Book of Doe is characteristic of much medieval art from this time period. Simple, flat, and colorful.
Who was Eva Hesse?
Eva Hesse, 1936 to 1970. Was a German-American painter and sculptor whose Jewish family dramatically escaped Nazi Germany. Her highly experimental art is usually categorized as minimalist, however. Unlike many minimalists, narrative and personal history are an important part of her work. Her installation sculpture Rope Piece, 1969 to 1970, a tangled, slightly frightening web of rope, string, and wire, has a different form each time it is moved to a new location. The piece has been described as a drawing in space. Her work Accession to, 1968 to 1969, now at the Detroit Institute of Art, is a cube made of vinyl and steel. The cube is open at the top, revealing a lush layer of fiber-like tubes, a reaction against the severity of much minimalist art.
What is Rubenesque?
Rubens had a very particular way of depicting figures in his paintings. His works are filled with strong, voluptuous, and attractive people. His style is so consistent, that these Rubenesque figures serve as a relatively quick and easy way to identify a Rubens painting. In his mythological painting, Venus and Adonis, c. 1635, Rubens depicts the ancient goddess of love just as her lover, Paris, must leave. Along with her cherubic son Cupid, Venus clings to Adonis. Her long, red hair flows around her face and her supple fingers press into Adonis' muscular arms as she pleads with him. Nude, her body is fleshy and white, quite different from the thin, elongated forms popular during previous centuries of Northern European art. The term Rubenesque is therefore used to describe any similarly depicted figure in the work of other artists who have been inspired by the Flemish master.
What happened to the work of Ace?
In April of 2003, the work of Ace was stolen from the Iraq Museum in Baghdad. During the civil unrest that followed the U.S. invasion of the country, it was a devastating loss for art history, and especially the people of Iraq, for whom the vase represents an important part of their cultural heritage. Fortunately, the vase was returned a few months later, though it was badly damaged.
How did the Reformation affect art during and after the 16th century?
The Protestant Reformation had an enormous impact on all of Europe, forever changing the political power of the Catholic Church and shifting allegiances among European countries according to religion. The Reformation began in 1517 when Martin Luther published his 95 Theses, a declaration of protest against the Catholic Church, specifically with regards to the Church's selling of indulgences, and questioned the authority of the Pope. Luther even mentions the Pope's extravagant spending on the new St. Peter's Basilica project as a point of contention. Martin Luther was excommunicated by the Pope, but those who shared his feelings vowed to break away from the Church, resulting in violence that lasted decades. Those Christians who broke away from the Catholic Church were called Protestants. During the 16th century, Europe was divided among countries that supported Catholicism and those that supported the Protestants. The Catholic countries included Italy, Spain, France, Flanders, and Belgium. The Protestant countries were England, Switzerland, Germany, and the Northern Netherlands. Protestant artists and patrons approached art differently than their Catholic counterparts. In Protestant countries, religious subjects were less in demand and most patrons were wealthy individuals who favored portraits, scenes depicting moral proverbs, still lives, and eventually landscapes. In response to the Reformation, The Catholic Church launched the Counter-Reformation in an effort to revive Catholic faith. Catholic patrons commissioned Christian art that emphasized reverence of the Trinity and of the Virgin Mary, as well as demonstrated restraint in the use of nudity and pagan subject matter.
What is a ziggurat?
A ziggurat is a mountain-like structure formed by a series of steps and topped with a temple or a shrine. Placing shrines and temples at a higher elevation served both practical and religious purposes. Practically speaking, the higher elevation would protect the religious structure from flooding or attack. It also served to glorify the ruler and the gods worshipped at the site. Ziggurats represented a place where heaven and earth met. The ruins of the White Temple at Uruk are located in what is now known as Warka, Iraq. This temple was part of a ziggurat dedicated to the Sumerian god Anu, and housed statues of gods, goddesses, and temple patrons. It was oriented along the points of the compass and had a central chamber with an altar for religious rituals.
What is Hinduism?
With its roots in the culture of the Indus Valley, Hinduism is not a monolithic religion, but a name that encompasses diverse groups who worship many different gods and goddesses with multifaceted attributes. One major unifying element of Hinduism is adherence to the Vedas, ancient works of literature that serve as the foundation of the Hindu religion.
Who is Mona Hatoum?
Mona Hatoum, 1952, is a Palestinian video and installation artist who was raised in Lebanon and works primarily in Britain. Hatoum's conceptual installations and performance pieces often communicate themes of exile and authority. Examples of her work include the minimalist Socle du Monde, Base of the World, 1992 to 1993. A large black cube that contrasts a metallic interior structure with a softer, more organic exterior embellishment.
What is the Akbarnama?
The Akbarnama, c. 1569 to 1590, was a series of 116 miniature paintings that document the life and successes of Akbar the Great. The Akbarnama is known for its exceptional detail and realism. Multiple artists worked to produce the work. Akbar the Great commissioned his friend Abul Fasil, 1551 to 1602, to write the biography. For the ruler's personal copy, the painter Baswan was charged with designing and drawing the illustrations, while Shatar Muni then provided the coloring. Folio 22 of the Akbarnama, now part of the collection at the Victoria and Albert Museum. vividly depicts Akbar riding Hawaii, a wild elephant, chasing a second enormous, out-of-control elephant as it stampedes across a pontoon bridge. The image is filled with bold colors and details that add drama to the story. The water is textured so as to appear disturbed by the thrashing of the boatman knocked into it by the charging elephant. According to the story, Akbar was able to calm and capture the elephant, and the image stands as a metaphor for Akbar's ability to rule a large and often difficult empire.
How are Chinese characters formed?
Rather than referring to sounds like the English alphabet, the letters of the Chinese alphabet refer to entire words or ideas. These are called characters, or calligraphs. Like Near Eastern cuneiform and Egyptian hieroglyphs. Some Chinese characters started out as pictographs, which means the character resembles what it depicts. The Chinese language is extremely visual in that the form of the language also denotes meaning. And this made a major impact on Chinese art throughout history.
What is Nouveau Realisme, New Realism?
Founded in 1960 by French art critic Pierre Restani, Nouveau Realisme is an art movement that developed as a reaction against 20th-century abstraction and art informal. Many of the Nouveau Realists, or New Realists, were not painters, but artists who experimented with art forms such as décollage, a process of ripping or tearing an image. Usually posters of advertisements, to create something new. The best examples of Nouveau Realist décollage is the work of François Dufresne and Memo Rotella, 1918-2006. The artist Jean Tinguely, 1925-1991, extended this technique to include scrap metal, old bottles, motors, and other industrial objects in his work, Homage to New York, 1960. Which he designed to spectacularly self-destruct at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. By contrast, Yves Klein, 1928-1962, was a painter who explored the power of pure color, even developing his own blue, called International Klein Blue, 1 kb. The New Realists used the objects of the real world, often junk, as their palette. And by doing so commented on modern life in a manner unique from other artists of the period.
What does a Hindu temple look like?
Hindu temples are one of the primary examples of Hindu architecture in India and Southeast Asia. They are usually built of cut rock, and although there is a great deal of stylistic diversity, are generally placed within two categories, northern and southern style. Hindu temples are raised on a podium, somewhat like an Etruscan temple, called a plinth. Temples in the northern style feature a large tower in the shape of a beehive, called Shikhara, which means mountain peak. Atop the tower is a rounded form known as an amulika because of the similarly shaped umla fruit. These amalikas are used to decorate lower portions of the Shikhara as well. The halls of a northern-style temple have a series of halls called mandapas, which lead to the garbhagriha, an inner sanctuary used to house a sacred image. The halls are themselves decorated with smaller, tower-like roofs. An example of a northern-style Hindu temple is the Kandariya Mahadeva temple in Khajuraho, India, which was built around 1000 CE. Southern-style Hindu temples feature a pyramid-like tiered tower called a vimana, and this is topped with a round capstone. The halls of a southern-style temple also lead to an inner chamber, but have flat roofs and pillared mandapas. An example of a southern-style Hindu temple is the Rudraeshvara temple in Tanjavur, India, which was built around 1010 CE.
What is Bedoin?
Bedoin is a Buddhist temple originally built during the Heian period in a mountainous region near Kyoto. Considered one of the most beautiful Pure Land Buddhist temples. Bedoin is also known as Phoenix Hall because of two bronze phoenixes on the roof, and because the building's upswept rooflines are considered bird-like. It sits in front of a reflecting pond designed in the shape of the Sanskrit letter A, which is the sacred symbol of the Amida Buddha.
Who was Albrecht Dürer?
Albrecht Dürer, 1471–1528, was a great master from Germany known for his immaculately detailed drawings, paintings, and prints. He wrote a book of advice for artists called, Four Books of Human Proportion, and was known to be self-confident and scientifically minded. Like Leonardo da Vinci, Dürer was interested in the observable world. He trained as a goldsmith. This is likely where he gained the skills and experience needed to become a successful printmaker, a form that allowed him to demonstrate his great skill in working with line. Dürer's skill was clear from a young age. At 13, he completed a self-portrait upon which he wrote, "Here I portrayed myself in the year 1484 in a mirror when I was still a child," as quoted in Wood's p. 54. Later self-portraits emphasized the luxurious texture of his long, flowing hair, and one of his most impressive drawings is a hare. 1502, in which Dürer masterfully depicts the sheen of a hare's fur in watercolor. Die-Irers woodcuts, engravings, and etchings did a great deal to raise the status of printmaking to a fine art. Two of his most well-known prints are The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, 1497–1498, and Melancholiae, 1514.
What is Neolithic art?
The Neolithic period is the New Stone Age, which lasted from approximately 6000 BCE until 2000 BCE. Unlike their Paleolithic predecessors, Neolithic people were settled rather than migratory, domesticating plants and animals for the first time. The earliest evidence of Neolithic culture has been found in the Near East, including the modern-day countries of Jordan, Syria, and Turkey. Examples of Neolithic art include clay pottery and monumental stone monuments.
What is a kouros?
Kouros, plural kouroi, is a term used to refer to a freestanding sculpture of a young male during the archaic period of ancient Greek art. A female equivalent is known as a koure, plural kourei. These statues were usually life-size and influenced by Egyptian sculpture. A kouros faces frontally and takes a small step forward, much like the sculpture of Menkaure and a queen. The arms are held firmly at the sides and the hair is formed in long rows of stylized braids. Unlike Egyptian sculptures, male kouroi were completely nude and emphasized youth and athleticism.
What is a historiad capital?
An innovative element of Romanesque church decoration. A historiated capital is a space just above a column that illustrates a compressed narrative. Flight into Egypt is a 12th century historiated capital in the French Cathedral of Saint-Lazare. Attributed to the sculptor master Gisli Berthouz. The scene depicts the Madonna and Child riding a donkey, led by Saint Joseph. Mary looks straight ahead while St. Joseph leans forward, his body conforming to the trapezoidal shape of the capital. More than mere decoration. This historiated capital serves to educate by representing symbolic stories 94 from the Bible.
What is the Great Mosque at Jinn?
Also referred to as the Great Friday Mosque at Jinn. The Great Mosque is the largest mud brick structure in the world. At least 3 main incarnations of the mosque have existed, including an original mosque from the 13th century. And 2 major reconstructions in the 19th and early 20th centuries. The city of Jinn, located in Mali, was a sophisticated urban and religious center by the 13th century due to its location along Saharan trade routes, and the expansion of Islam. The Great Mosque at Jinn is characterized by its smooth, beige walls constructed of sun-baked mud bricks. The bricks themselves were composed of clay and straw. as well as the many wooden poles that stick out from the walls. Due to the fragile nature of the mud bricks, the walls of the mosque are frequently rebuilt, and the wood supports allow workers to replaster the exterior. During a special annual festival in which the entire community participates. The grand design of the Great Mosque at Jinn influenced Islamic architecture in other parts of Africa, including the Sudan.
Who were the Lorenzetti brothers?
The Lorenzetti brothers were Sienese painters who were influenced by the work of Duccio, the father of Sienese painting. Pietro, c.1280 c.1348, and Ambrogio, d.c. 1348, are known for their simple yet noble paintings and innovations in creating a sense of real space in their work. Ambrogio painted monumental frescoes depicting an allegory of both good and bad government in Siena's main civic building, the Palazzo Pubblico, in 1338. The allegory of good government in the city visually describes the benefits of a just government on its people by depicting an idealized Siena. The complex fresco, filled with beautiful, multicolored buildings and allegorical figures, achieves a natural sense of scale between the figures and the environment. On a nearby wall in the palazzo, the allegory of bad government in the city shows what can happen when a city loses its way. The personified figures of avarice, pride, and glory lurk above the head of a brutish ruler while the people of the city suffer.
What is the Würzburg residence?
The Würzburg residence is an important example of Rococo architecture in Germany designed by Johann Balthasar Neumann. 1687 to 1744, for the Prince Bishop of Würzburg, a member of the Schönborn family. The Kaisersaal, or Imperial Hall, of the residence has a gold, white, and pastel color scheme and emphasizes curves and elaborate ornamentation, including marble columns and undulating moldings. A grand staircase expands to over 600 square feet. Its balustrades and banisters decorated with statues and Greek vases. Above the sprawling stairs, the Italian Rococo artist Giovanni Tiepolo painted what is believed to be the largest ceiling fresco in the world. It depicts the Prince Bishop with the Greek god Apollo, along with images of the seasons, the zodiac, and the four known continents of the world, all symbolizing the wide-reaching power of the Schönborn family.
What is the Taj Mahal?
The Taj Mahal, in Agra, India, is one of the most recognizable structures around the world. With its white onion-shaped domes, arched windows, and long reflective pool. The Taj Mahal is made of marble, inlaid with colorful stones in a floral pattern. and also decorated with calligraphy inscriptions from the Quran. It is not a palace, but a mausoleum built by the 17th century Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan, grandson of Akbar the Great, for his third wife, Mumtaz Mahal. Monumental tombs were part of an Islamic tradition, and the design of the Taj Mahal mirrors the design of garden pavilions in Iran. It evokes a sense of calm and serenity through its symmetrical and balanced forms, and expansive pools and tall minarets. The building is symbolically linked to descriptions of gardens in paradise from the Quran and is considered a masterpiece of Indo-Islamic architecture.
What is style?
The style of a work of art is the distinctive way in which it has been formally arranged. Style can also refer to the way in which a work of art is characteristic of the work of a specific artist, and the time period, or the geographical location, in which it was created. For example, a painting by Vincent van Gogh can be instantly recognizable because of its distinctive style. Van Gogh is known for paintings that feature bold colors, thick application of paint, and noticeable brush strokes.
What is the difference between Romanticism and realism?
Although seemingly at odds, 19th century realism overlapped quite a bit with the Romantic movement of the same period. While the Romantics reacted against the Enlightenment and were often idealistic in their representation of historical and current events, the 19th century realists were interested in accurately depicting the human condition, with an element of social awareness. Both realists and romantics valued direct observation of nature, though realists further emphasized social observation and, occasionally, political and social satire.
Who was Bicitra?
Bicitra was an important court painter active during the reign of Akbar the Great's son, Jahangir, who ruled from 1605 to 1627, as well as Shah Jahan, who built the Taj Mahal. Bicitra was a skilled miniature painter who was possibly raised by the court, which is where he got his early education. He was interested in European painting, and some of his work blends Indian landscapes with European perspective techniques. In his miniature painting, Jahangir preferring a Sufi to kings, c. 1625, Bicitra included a small self-portrait among a group of other portraits of important figures such as Ottoman rulers and even King James I of England, which Bicitra likely copied from another portrait. The self-portrait shows the artist holding a small painting of himself, resulting in a painting within a painting. Bicitra bows respectfully to Jahangir, the Mughal ruler.
What is constructivism?
Constructivism made a major impact on other 20th century movements such as Bauhaus and Stil. Like Supermatism, constructivism was highly influenced by both Cubism and Futurism, and emphasized abstraction and the purity of geometric forms. The movement was founded by Russian painter and architect Vladimir Tatlin, 1885 to 1953, who created sculptural constructions. Interestingly, Tatlin did not consider himself a constructivist but rather a productivist. Though his work is considered to be at the heart of the movement. Tatlin made his sculptural assemblages out of industrial materials such as wood, plaster, glass, and metal. He also believed that art served an important social purpose, and the constructivist movement is tied to the radical political changes that occurred in Russia during the October Revolution in 1917. Constructivist artists believed that art could play an important role in the creation of a new, utopian society. One of the key elements of constructivism is the idea that a work of art, whether a painting or a sculpture, is created by assembling so-called autonomous elements. For example, a sculpture is made up of individual elements such as a line and a plane. This new concept conceived of sculpture as an additive, rather than reductive process. Materials are compiled, rather than carved away. And this had a major impact on painting, architecture, and design in the 20th century.
How did Japanese art change during the Meiji period?
The Meiji period lasted from 1868 to 1912, and during this time oil painting became popular in Japan after Japanese artists were exposed to Western styles of art. Subjects popular during the Edo period, such as courtesans, were still popular during the Meiji period. For example, in 1872, Takahashi Yuichi painted Warren, Grand Courtesan, a Western-style portrait painted in oil, but that incorporates patterns and colors used in ukiyo-e paintings. In this painting, Takahashi Yuichi, 1828 to 1894, depicts the elegant sitter's brightly colored garments as disparate, abstract sections of color and texture, a technique derived from traditional Japanese painting. Western styles were so popular during the Meiji period that some artists were concerned that Japan would lose its own distinctive style. Traditional artists such as Yoko Yamatake, 1853 to 1908, wanted to breathe life into Japanese styles of painting by infusing them with some Western techniques, but to emphasize their Japanese character in a style known as Nihonga.
What are textiles?
Textiles are fiber-based fabrics such as cotton, wool, or silk, or synthetic fibers such as polyester. The fibers are made into cloth through various techniques including weaving, tapestry, and felting. Textiles are a major art form around the world and are gaining in popularity amongst contemporary fine artists.
What is the Lion Man of Hollenstein-Stadel?
Most Paleolithic sculpture depicts women, not men, but an exception to this is the Lion Man. Carved from mammoth ivory and dating from approximately 30,000 B.C.E. discovered in modern-day Germany. The Lion Man sculpture depicts a blend of feline and human characteristics. Some scholars believe the Lion Man is actually a lion woman. And some other examples of similar female sculpture have been discovered. This sculpture is almost a foot high, much bigger than the comparatively stumpy Venus of Willendorf, and demonstrates the high-quality carving skills and creativity possessed by prehistoric people. The significance of the Lion Man sculpture is not known. It is possible the piece depicts a human figure wearing a lion mask. But it is also possible that the work depicts a human-animal hybrid of spiritual significance.
What is abstraction?
Artists interested in abstraction are not concerned with accurately representing the visual world in their work. While some abstract artists distort the real world, other abstract artists are purely expressive and do not refer to the real world at all. Abstract art is sometimes referred to as non-representational art. Piet Mondrian was a 20th-century Dutch painter who pioneered abstraction in an art movement called de Stijl. Mondrian is famous for his paintings containing simple, balanced, geometric forms using a limited color palette.
Can a video game be a work of art?
All works of art, but perhaps most obviously installation art, rely upon the participation of viewer to generate meaning. When you go to a gallery and look the art, your thoughts and experiences affect the meaning of the art you see and interpret. This exchange is naturally extended to the concept of gameplay and video games. Game theory and game art have been a fruitful source of artistic exploration for years. In 2001, the Massachusetts Museum of Contemporary Art exhibited Game Show. And in 2012 the Smithsonian American Art Museum held a show called The Art of Video Games. The show's curator, Chris Melisinos, explained that through the video game medium, we are invited by the artist to inject our own morality, our own worldview, our own experiences into the game as we play it. And what comes out is wholly different from everybody that experiences it, the art of video games. Like other forms of digital art, video game art is very young. and generations of innovative artists will likely mine the medium for its theoretical and aesthetic potential in the years to come.
What is the Aztec calendar stone?
Like the Mayans, the Aztec were deeply interested in calendars, which were linked to concepts of creation. The Aztec calendar stone, c. 1502–1520, is large, over 11 feet in diameter and over 25 tons. Also called the sunstone, the carved stone emphasizes the Aztec concept of cyclical time and reflects the Aztecs' cosmology and mythology. At the center of the stone is an image of the creature Alin, its tongue in the shape of a knife. Also depicted on the stone are the first 4 suns and the bodies of 2 fire gods, according to Aztec tradition. The monumental carving is not exactly a marker of time, though there are markings that indicate the 20-day Aztec calendar, and the date of the birth of the current, 5th, sun. The stone was excavated in the center of Mexico City, which now lies at the heart of the former Aztec Empire, the city of Teotihuacan. Teotihuacan was considered the birthplace of the 5th and current sun, and was the political center of the empire. Although the meaning of the Aztec calendar stone remains mysterious, its image continues to influence modern Mexican art and culture.